What if I told you there are 7 messages that few have dared to reveal that can change the way you watch your faith? Imagine for a moment a voice that doesn't shout, but touches the heart of things. Imagine signs that don't appear in the newspapers, but that have penetrated the daily lives of ordinary people and transformed homes, decisions, and destinies. Today we'll walk one of these little discussed paths, the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje messages that, more than pretty phrases, are invitations to action, conversion, and watchfulness of faith. Have you ever experienced that moment when you felt a spiritual void that no religious routine seemed to fill? Or perhaps you've realized that, even with prayer and good intentions, something is missing: a clarity, a method, a direct call that shows the next step. If the answer is yes, stay with me until the end. Because what you're about to discover may surprise you and perhaps reorganize how you live your faith in your daily life. I'm not talking about abstract doctrines or interesting tidbits for debate. I'm talking about experiences that visionaries, families, and communities have reported as catalysts for transformation, invitations to fasting that renew the heart, to silence that allows us to listen, to protecting the home through simple practices, and to inner preparation when signs appear on the horizon of history. Think of the small decisions that change a family: a prayer said together at dusk, a digital fast that restores presence to relationships, a moment of silence that allows us to discern between panic and calling. These messages act exactly like that's practical guidance that, if accepted, bears concrete fruit. I don't want to create alarm, I want to awaken responsibility. There is a tone of urgency in the Medjugorje messages that comes not from a desire to scare, but from pointing to a real need for change, purification through the fire of trials that strengthens, vigilance that protects, and missionary commitment that transforms those who accept the call. In accounts that have crossed borders, many describe bodily sensations, nights of intense prayer, and signs both intimate and communal that preceded profound decisions. These accounts add authority to the story. It's not simply a pretty idea. These are lives that have changed. In this video, you'll hear stories, understand symbols, and receive practical guidance so this message can reach your home without sensationalism. With pastoral care and careful discernment, I'll also show you how to implement small spiritual routines that align with the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, so you don't just rely on information but produce real transformation. Before we dive into the messages themselves, it's important to put everything in a clear context: who the visionaries are, what the setting of Medjugorje is, and why so many believe these warnings are, in fact, a look from heaven cast upon those who watch over their faith. Before delving into the messages, we need to understand where this warning comes from. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what resonated most with you. Share your experience, opinion, or even that feeling that arose while listening. Hearing your stories helps illuminate the topic in ways I never could alone. If you've experienced signs, intense nights of prayer, or small changes in your home after a spiritual decision, share your thoughts below. Your voice can comfort someone going through the same thing and strengthen our community of faith watchers. And if this video is bringing clarity or touched something within you, give it a like. It's not just a number, it's a sign that these messages deserve to be heard by more people. Subscribe to the channel if you want to continue receiving content like this. Your subscription keeps the work alive, helps this type of reflection reach other homes, and allows us to delve even deeper into the next stages of the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. It's together that we build a space for prayer, discernment, and action. Now, with you close by, let us enter into the first glimpse of heaven and understand why this call to conversion is so urgent and so transformative. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Imagine the scene. It's dawn, the house is still asleep, the smell of wood is in the air, and the dim light from the lamp casts shadows on the walls. Someone kneels, not out of obligation, but out of a need that comes from within. Prayer isn't born from a memorized script. It's born from a heart that feels the weight of choices and seeks cleansing. In this silence, many of the witnesses of Medjugorje report that the experience of conversion didn't come as a fleeting emotion, but as a decisive break from routine, a shift in mindset that altered decisions and, consequently, changed the entire family dynamic. Think about the practical transformation. It's not just crying and prayer. It's deciding to dedicate time to presence. It's choosing words that build up rather than hurt. It's restoring habits that sustain faith in daily life. The profound conversion these messages proposed has this almost artisanal quality. It's made of small adjustments, discrete sacrifices, gestures that generate impact throughout the day. When we delve deeper into the original accounts, we realize that this isn't an isolated experience of ecstasy, but a calling that challenges our comfort zone. The first visionaries, ordinary young people, felt the world needed to hear this call, because, deep within their communities, there was a spiritual fatigue, scattered affection, reversed priorities. decisions made based on immediacy rather than the hidden truth that guides good, and it is precisely there, among the simple things of life, that conversion manifests its power. It redefines priorities, corrects course, and rebuilds bonds. Many families described a tangible change, a dinner that once became a time for sharing. Rather than a quick transition between commitments, a conversation that once was lost in screens is now sustained around the table. A father who once again prays with his children before bed. These concrete fruits are the mark that the transformation was not merely sentimental, but practical, rooted in everyday choices. The journey of conversion outlined in the unrevealed messages of Medjugorje therefore has a pedagogical aspect. It teaches a new discipline of the soul, a routine of vigilance that is reflected in attitudes. And there is something profoundly human about this. Conversion demands authenticity. It demands that we confront our own fragility without disguise. In the accounts of those who have lived this process, a sensory scene often comes along that repeats itself, tears that release, a silence that reveals, the sensation of a weight being lifted from the chest. These inner signs are catalysts. They bring clarity and move toward decisions that previously seemed difficult. But conversion, to be true, cannot be reduced to an intimate and beautiful moment. It must bear fruit that touches community life. This is why the stories from Medjugorje have gained such repercussion, not because they promoted mystical spectacles, but because they fostered a change of mindset and a real impact on relationships. And when a family changes, the effect reverberates beyond the walls of a home. Another point worth noting is the subtlety with which this invitation to conversion is presented. It rarely appears as a command. It appears as a plea, as a loving persuasion that invites us to take responsibility. There is freedom in the invitation, and this freedom is what generates authentic commitment. Forced transformation is unsustainable. Transformation, proposed and embraced by the will, is what creates resilience and maturity. Behind the scenes of these experiences, we also see the process of discernment. Conversion requires accompaniment, prayerful reading, and often pastoral guidance, so that the decisions made bring growth and not just emotional relief. This bridge between revelation and practice is crucial. Without it, there is a risk of misinterpretation, of confusing fervor with depth. Therefore, those who accept the call try to measure signs by the criterion of fruits: greater charity, renewed patience, reconciliation instead of isolation. And when these fruits appear, the truth claimed by the story is confirmed in concrete life. There is also a dimension of courage in these stories. Profound conversion requires the courage to change habits, to face internal and external resistance, to alter plans and guide decisions according to a new light. It's not uncommon to hear testimonies from people who, after an inner experience, changed jobs, reconciled with someone, or reinterpreted a vocation decisions that seemed small but had a profound impact on their personal journey. And here comes an often underestimated element. Conversion transforms one's mindset about time and priorities. Instead of living solely for urgencies, one begins to invest in things that nourish and sustain. Instead of seeking immediate results, one begins to accept the slow work of character building. This shift in perspective has practical consequences. It organizes the day, redefines energy expenditure, and alters the direction of relationships. When faith ceases to be something peripheral and becomes a guiding principle, decisions gain coherence, and the impact on daily life becomes visible. Something that also draws attention in the accounts is the language of symbols and images. Many describe sensations that don't fit into rational arguments but have practical power: a powerful image in prayer that guides a decision, a dream that illuminates a path, a sign that reorients a choice. These elements, which we could call spiritual background, are not ends in themselves, but instruments of transformation. Revelation acts as a key that opens doors to a life more centered and effective in the practice of love. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. If conversion opens the door, the second message shows the way to remain within it. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. If conversion was the door that opened, fasting and prayer are the path that keeps that door wide open, allowing transformation to continue happening day after day. In Medjugorje, the emphasis on this point is almost a refrain: constant prayer, perseverance, and fasting as instruments of spiritual clarity and inner vigilance. Fasting here isn't just about depriving yourself of food, it's a conscious act of emptying yourself so you can be filled with what's essential. Some people start by cutting back on one meal a week. Others practice what's called a digital fast, turning off social media or distractions for a few hours a day. The reported effect is not just physical, but mental. The mind seems to gain space, as if there were less noise to hinder discernment. And it's precisely this clarity that the visionaries say is necessary for the message to bear fruit. For people to be able to make decisions more consciously, instead of reacting solely to external pressures. Prayer, in turn, acts as the breath of this new inner life. It doesn't have to be long or complicated, just consistency. Many families who responded to Medjugorje's invitation created a small daily ritual. Something as simple as lighting a candle and praying an Our Father together at dusk, or setting aside 5 minutes of silence before bed. The impact of this, according to testimonies, was surprising. Fewer arguments, more patience among family members, a sense of protection that came not from external circumstances but from within. And here's a practical point. Do this for 7 days and observe what changes in your inner peace. It may seem small, but this short commitment creates a habit that begins to reorganize the heart and mind. There are moving accounts of people who, after years of conflict with a child or spouse, noticed subtle changes in their relationship after starting a prayer routine. Not because the other person changed immediately, but because their own inner disposition was shaped. Their reaction to provocations became calmer, and their words more considered. Fasting helps break automatic patterns. By depriving the body of something, the person trains the will, reinforces discipline, and rediscovers that they are capable of choice, not just being driven by impulse. This practice, when done purposefully, eliminates distractions and restores a healthy sense of control over one's life. Another important aspect is that fasting and prayer strengthen each other. Fasting prepares the ground. Prayer sows the seed. When one fasts, prayer becomes more lucid, more intense. When one prays, fasting ceases to be a burden and becomes an act of surrender. This combination creates a mentality of vigilance, a state of attention to what is happening within and around us. It's as if the heart becomes more quickly aware of signs of anxiety, pride, or discouragement, and can correct them before they take hold. These practices also have the power to break destructive cycles. Someone who used to retreat into harmful habits when stressed discovers, through fasting, that they can transform that moment of escape into a moment of prayer. An overwhelmed mother finds a 10-minute pause of silence as a point of balance before reacting to the chaos at home. Small practices, small gestures, but they generate lasting impact. This is the power of this second message. It doesn't ask you to change everything at once, but to build a journey of small, conscious choices that, together, lead to a more fulfilling life. It's fascinating to note that in many of these testimonies, continuous prayer was responsible for moments of revelation, where the person felt an answer come clearly, whether through a verse that leaped out at them or a sudden peace in the midst of a difficult decision. It's as if the act of prayer creates space for hidden truth to emerge, bringing light to what was previously confusing. And this light changes everything. It changes the tone of voice, the priorities of the day, and even the way we face challenges. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. But it's not just action. There's a silence that needs to be cultivated, an inner space that prepares the heart to hear what often goes unnoticed in the noise of the world. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Imagine the home as a living organism, with its own rhythms, wounds that manifest themselves in repeated arguments, doors that creak with weariness, and rooms that hold memories. Protecting this space is both a practical act and a heartfelt decision. In the messages reported in Medjugorje, there is careful attention to family and home, because, in their view, the home is the first school of faith, the first field where transformation needs to take place and then radiate outward. This isn't about superstition or empty rituals. It's a proposal for a change in mindset about what it means to live, putting the environment at the service of peace, transforming routines into signs of care, and creating small rituals that anchor spiritual life in daily life. Think of a family in conflict, nights where the silence is heavy, dinners interrupted by arguments, children who learn to use screens as an escape, and the feeling that everyone passes so close to each other but never truly meets. Now imagine this same home a month after accepting a simple invitation. Establish a brief prayer before meals. Bless the entrance with a quick intention upon leaving and arriving. Set aside a moment each week for each member to share something they are grateful for. A discrete sequence of small decisions can reduce tension, restore respect, and generate an impact that goes beyond the symbolic. It changes the way we make daily decisions, how we choose to respond to conflict, and how we prioritize family time. Blessing the spaces, for example, doesn't need to be a long or complicated ritual. It can be a short prayer said aloud upon entering each room, a sprinkling of water blessed with a word of peace, or even a simple gesture of intent when bowing your head at the door, remembering to ask for protection for those who live there. These signals, repeated with faith and consistency, act as anchors that refocus attention and create a scenario conducive to transformation. By in many accounts, what confirms the effectiveness of these practices is not so much the grandeur of the act, but its consistency. A family that begins to pray together 3 times a week does not automatically guarantee harmony, but it builds a discipline of presence that gradually corrects harmful habits. It is a work of restoration that has a real impact. Fewer bitter words in the heat of the moment, more willingness to listen, decisions made with more consideration. Protecting the home, therefore, appears as an exercise in responsibility, is not a promise of an absence of problems, but a strength that prepares to weather the storms. A home that prays is more likely to weather the storms because its residents learn to first seek inner peace before reacting to conflict. And this peace is a collective resource that is built. I want to share a hypothetical story here that helps you understand this process. Imagine a home where a couple faced emotional distance. After years of intense work and accumulated hurt, the teenage son reacted with isolation. The mother-in-law lived in tension, and the house felt like a minefield of small explosions. One day, driven by a certain tiredness of seeing everything fall apart, they decided to try something simple. Inspired by surveillance messages, they turned off the televisions at dinner time, agreed not to use their cell phones at the table, and set aside 5 minutes after dinner for silent prayer, where each person gave thanks for something from the day. It wasn't a magic formula. There were days of resistance, complaints, and slip-ups. But after 2 weeks of practice, they began to notice changes. Conversations became less defensive. The teenager began to comment on small events at school, and the couple rediscovered tenderness in simple gestures. The visible change was the result of repeated decisions, a mindset that began to prioritize presence over haste, reflection over reaction, and mutual service over self-preservation. This is the kind of transformation that Medjugorje accounts often highlight as the fruit of domestic practices, not spectacular miracles, but ongoing cumulative impact. Furthermore, there are concrete and accessible practices that anyone can try. Establishing a sign of peace when entering the home, a gesture or word that recalls the purpose of protection. Creating a small altar or prayer corner with a symbol that signifies hope for the family. Scheduling a weekly screen-free time for conversation, or performing a simple blessing of the doors and windows once a month. Each of these actions is an investment in domestic culture, changing the environment and, gradually, changing the mindset of those who live there. These initiatives also have a pedagogical effect on children, who learn to associate home with places of listening, reconciliation, and prayer habits that can define entire trajectories. Another dimension that cannot be ignored is practical charity. Protecting the home often involves looking outward, making room for neighbors, and acts of generosity that prevent loneliness and strengthen the community. A protected home is one that not only welcomes, but is willing to serve. It is a nucleus that transmits its stability beyond its walls. And when the family engages in this movement, the impact extends beyond the home and reaches broader networks. Personal transformation becomes a driver of social change. Behind the scenes of these practices, there is always an element of decision, deciding that the home will be a project, choosing that certain routines will be a priority, opting for discipline over improvisation. These decisions, one by one, shape the domestic character and bear fruit of patience, resilience, and communion. It's not about perfection, it's about perseverance. About understanding that small daily revolutions can have a profound impact on each member's journey. And even when signs arise that require attention, an argument that insists on returning, a wound that won't heal, the home that has practiced prayer and blessing has the resources to respond with serenity, with dialogue, and by seeking outside help if necessary. Thus, protecting the home appears as a comprehensive strategy that combines prayer, simple rituals, and practical decisions, always guided by a hidden truth that gradually reveals itself, that spiritual stability is built through routine, and that the impact of this construction is measured in restored relationships and wiser choices. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Not everything is comfort. There's also a process of purification. Comment: I'm on this journey too. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. The figure of fire appears in the messages as a powerful metaphor, an image that simultaneously cuts and purifies. Fun fact: what, according to the seers, does fire usually purify first? I'm not talking about a destructive fire in the sense of sensationalist terror. I'm talking about tests that shape spiritual character, trials that act as furnaces where what is fragile is burned to make way for what is firm. In many spiritual traditions, fire symbolizes transformation, not just loss, but the reconfiguration of what remains. In the accounts, fire acts as a harsh scrutiny that reveals what truly sustains faith and love, exposing the hidden truth we often hide even from ourselves. According to those who witnessed it, the fire doesn't first enter through grand external displays, it begins with what prevents love from growing. It purifies pride that disguises itself as reason, purifies spiritual comfort that camouflages omission, purifies habits that erode patience and care. In practical terms, what is often burned first are empty routines, words spoken without intention, and decisions made out of inertia. It's a process that exposes weak points in our mindset and invites a review of priorities. What have I valued so far? What decisions have trapped me on a path that no longer nurtures goodness? This is the question the fire poses as a provocation. The language of fire, therefore, functions as an instrument of transformation that has a real impact on personal and collective journeys. People who have experienced trials describe how, After the crisis, something changed. Priorities were repositioned, relationships were sifted, and what remained became purer. The metaphor is authoritative because it confronts us with an implicitly pedagogical reality. Trials are not punishments. They are tests with an educational purpose. They forge resilience, hone character, and guide decisions toward what is essential. When embraced with discernment, trials become demanding teachers that teach us to distinguish between the urgent and the important. This isn't about glorifying suffering, far from it. The emphasis is on hope. Fire, when guided by faith and prudence, serves to clarify what is worth investing in life. Imagine the intimate scene. Someone faces a loss that disrupts plans. In grieving, this person discovers a new sensitivity to compassion, changes career paths to something that better serves the community, or finally decides to reconcile. The impact, in this case, is profound and practical. Transformation emerges not only as emotional consolation, but as a concrete redirection of the choices that shape the life project, choices that, little by little, alter the family and community narrative. Behind the scenes of these experiences, there's a pattern of revelations that deserves attention. The crisis usually begins where the person is most vulnerable, but the response comes through familiar spiritual practices: prayer, fasting, silence, now embraced with new intensity and purpose. This is a crucial point for the mindset of those who follow these messages. Don't expect spectacular gestures. The journey of transformation involves humble discipline, small, repeated decisions that build resilience and character. The truth is that inner remodeling happens in everyday life, in the repetition of choices that strengthen patience, generosity, and coherence between word and action. Interestingly, seers also describe physical and psychic signs that often accompany this purification process: sensations of inner warmth, nights of disturbed sleep, dreams laden with symbolic imagery, intense feelings that later transform into serenity. These signs are not universal, but they appear enough to be recognized as part of a pattern. For many, the presence of these signs served as confirmation that something was at work within, a kind of inner reorganization that preluded external changes in attitudes and decisions. Another striking point is how fire purifies collective structures. In communities that have experienced trials, collective losses, economic crises, internal conflicts, the messages conveyed have driven processes of reconciliation and reorganization. Rather than producing paralysis, the collective experience of fire has often generated mobilization, aid projects, listening networks, renewed practices of solidarity. The conversion that emerges from the ordeal is not mere it is a practical consequence that materializes in service and mutual care. Expanding the impact beyond individual biographies, it's important to emphasize that this process requires discernment. Purification is not synonymous with isolation or hasty rupture. Pastoral care is evident in the recommendations. Seek guidance, verify results, and avoid impulsive decisions based solely on emotion. The messages, at this point, guide a balanced practice. Allow the fire to work, but maintain verification mechanisms: trustworthy people, community conversation, and spiritual accompaniment. This approach avoids deviations and ensures that intimate revelations produce fruits that truly promote love, patience, and reconciliation. Furthermore, the metaphor of fire invites us to rethink our relationship with time. Trials require strategic patience. The purification process can be slow and demands persistence. Profound transformation is rarely instantaneous. It occurs through repetition, resilience, and the daily choice to stay the course. This hidden truth, that time is an agent of maturation, changes the mindset of those facing the test. Instead of seeking shortcuts, they embrace the journey as a school of maturity, where every decision counts and every sacrifice has purpose. There are stories that illustrate this dynamic well. People who have experienced serious illness have emerged with redefined priorities and a new sense of service. Community-based communities that have suffered tragedies have mobilized support networks that remain active well beyond the emergency. These examples show that fire doesn't just destroy, it reshapes, and the impact of this reshaping can be lasting and beneficial. As we look more closely at these experiences, we realize that purification produces a unique kind of resilience, a resilience tempered by faith and daily practice, which translates into wiser decisions and less impulsive courage. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. Comment there: this makes sense to me. And when the signs come together, concrete clues appear. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we talk about signs and so-called decisive hours, we enter a territory that blends the intimate with the public, the symbolic with the concrete, and therefore requires delicacy and balance. In many accounts of Medjugorje, the notion of a sign appears sometimes something seen in the sky, other times a collective sense of urgency, or even domestic events that serve as triggers for important decisions. These signs are not always external spectacles. They are often symptoms of a deeper spiritual reality pulsating behind the scenes of everyday life. This is why it's worth noting The real issue is not seeking spectacle, but learning to interpret what is already happening around us with vigilant eyes and a calm mind. Some visionaries speak of decisive hours. What does this mean to you? For those who listen carefully, this expression points to moments when individual and collective decisions become especially relevant, when the mentality of a community or family can lean toward better or worse. It's not an apocalyptic predestination. It is, rather, a call to responsibility. If circumstances change and a clue emerges, how will we respond with wisdom rather than panic? Signs can take many forms, and so discernment is essential. There are reports of unusual lights in the sky that have sparked curiosity in entire communities. But there are also much more intimate accounts, a sense of urgency in the heart, a succession of events that force quick decisions, or even small coincidences that disrupt routine and create a window of opportunity for change. In familiar environments, these signs sometimes appear as ruptures, a fight that exposes old wounds, news that forces a rethink of priorities, a service opportunity that arises unexpectedly. The impact is that decisions that could previously wait now require an immediate response, and that's where a prepared mindset makes all the difference. Spiritual preparation is not synonymous with fear. It is an investment in maturity. It means cultivating routines and decisions that allow us to respond clearly when something important happens. This involves 3 practical steps. First, forming an inner foundation: prayer, fasting, silence that reduces anxiety and increases the capacity for discernment. Second, building networks of accountability, trustworthy people, pastoral guidance, community dialogue to avoid impulsive decisions. Third, adopting habits of presence that transform reactions into thoughtful responses. These 3 elements create a type of readiness that doesn't wait for the signal to act, but recognizes it wisely when it comes. There's a real danger of mistaking any emotional event for a spiritual sign, which is why traditional accounts insist on verification by the results. When a clue seems to signal something greater, the question to ask is a practical one. What fruits does this response yield? More patience and charity, more responsibility and service, or more fear and disorder? The answer isn't trivial, but it is decisive. The hidden truth that some visionaries point to isn't revealed in instantaneous coercion. It's confirmed by the impact it has on people's lives over time. Therefore, responsible interpretation requires strategic patience, perceiving the clue, testing it, discussing it with the community, and only then making decisions that can generate lasting transformations. From a collective perspective, signals, perceived by diverse members of a community, can act as catalysts for mobilization. In some reported situations, a collective sense of urgency led to community actions, prayer vigils, support networks, and the reorganization of local priorities. This type of response demonstrates the impact that vigilance can have when converted into healthy action. Even so, caution is needed with mass effects based on uncritical emotion. The truth is that the authenticity of a signal is revealed when it translates into service, not spectacle. The desired transformation is always relational, improved decisions that affects lives, greater balance in priorities, and increased mutual care. On a personal level, recognizing an intimate sign requires courage to reconsider previous decisions. Sometimes the sign is a persistent discomfort that calls for abandoning a project that no longer edifies. Other times, it's an impulse to serve that conflicts with a comfortable career. A prepared mindset sees the sign as an invitation to practical conversion, to reposition priorities, reorganize time, and choose what bears fruit. It's a dynamic of adjustments that requires discernment and also a willingness to take holy risks, to risk change for something that at first glance may seem uncertain, but which, in the end, reveals coherence with fundamental principles. The behind the scenes of these interpretations is full of stories where correctly reading the sign prevented hasty decisions and where negligence transformed a clue into a crisis. This teaches us a practical lesson: cultivating assessment tools, prayer, consulting trusted people, checking the results is essential to transforming sensitivity into wisdom. In terms of routine, this can translate into simple practices: setting aside regular moments to share intuitions with someone you trust, keeping a spiritual journal where you record signs and how you responded to them, and establishing periods of deliberate silence to test the clarity of your perceptions. These small habits help transform instinct into judgment. It's also necessary to consider the psychological impact of these signs. Intense feelings can be mistaken for legitimate revelations, especially when the person lives in a situation of emotional fragility. Therefore, pastoral prudence in communities that welcome reports of signs is essential. Mental health care, support from trusted leaders, and the practice of collective examination of conscience help avoid distortions. The journey of vigilance is, therefore, also a journey of emotional and social responsibility, where truth is not individualistic, but communal. At the same time, we cannot lose sight of the hopeful nature of this message. Signs often come as calls of opportunity, windows where decisions can produce a positive impact. Rather than living in a paralyzing apocalyptic expectation, the proposed mindset is one of generous readiness, living well today so that we are ready to respond with dedication when a call presents itself. This attitude transforms fear into service, and anxiety into discipline. And there's another curious aspect to the narratives: the relationship between small domestic signals and great collective intuitions. Sometimes, a change in one person's heart is the starting point that spreads and becomes a community attitude. Other times, a signal perceived by many acts as a catalyst for support organizations, vigils, and concrete actions. The impact is that the intimate nourishes the collective, and the collective strengthens the intimate, in a kind of network of discernment that enhances the capacity to make wise decisions in crucial moments. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. And finally, the message that sums up the destiny of this calling. Comment below. This makes sense to me now. I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Imagining this last message as a final invitation is no exaggeration. It doesn't come as an ultimatum, but as a loving responsibility that calls each of us to take on a mission and commitment. Being vigilant means more than watching over oneself. It's deciding to be salt and light wherever we live, multiplying peace, care, and clarity. It's not for the few. It's for those who, with practical courage, accept transforming their own routine into a mission field. Think of it as a call to make decisions that don't end in repeated actions that strengthen the community, accompanying someone in suffering, praying as a family, offering discreet service to a neighbor in need, practicing sincere hospitality. The proposed mission is concrete, not abstract. It demands presence, coherence, and commitment. When we talk about personal mission, we're talking about a shift in mindset that alters priorities and redefines impact. It's no longer just about experiencing inner consolation, but about translating that experience into choices that benefit others. Someone who courageously decides to watch over their faith begins to view everyday decisions from a different perspective. Free time ceases to be merely consumption and becomes an opportunity for service. Conversations that could be critical become occasions for edification. Financial resources that were previously spent on distraction can be reallocated to support a community project. These are small, almost invisible decisions, but they accumulate. Transformation. The truth hidden in these messages appears precisely there. The call is not just to receive consolation, but to multiply what has been received. There is authority in the words that describe this final invitation, because it stems from stories that speak not of exceptional great men, but of ordinary families who agreed to change their habits. Authority lies behind the scenes of the changed lives, in the subtle impact that is felt when the practice continues. A clear example: a group of neighbors who decides to organize a weekly visit to elderly people on the streets. It wasn't a media-driven action, but it changed the quality of life of several people, brought generations together, and gave meaning to the routines of those who participated. Or think of a person who, prompted by a prayer experience, begins to offer time to listen to those who are suffering. This decision, made repeatedly, builds support networks that withstand crisis. This is how mission and commitment generate real impact, through repetition and consistency, not through isolated, spectacular gestures. The formative dimension of this invitation also requires preparation. It's not enough to feel compassion. One must learn to channel it into sustainable practices. Accompanying someone in pain requires trained listening, unhurried presence, and, often, the ability to articulate practical resources. Praying as a family requires discipline to avoid becoming a formality. It requires meaning and creativity to become life. Serving is not a one-time impulse. It is a lifestyle that demands decision and planning. Therefore, taking on a mission implies cultivating habits, prayer routines, times of silence, community gatherings that sustain an attitude of giving. This is the transformation that shifts mindsets from a self-centeredness centered on consumption to one oriented toward service and the construction of the common good. Another important facet is the courage to transmit the messages. Invite not only receiving, but also being a channel, sharing what has been learned, sharing successful practices, being a humble witness. This transmission does not require clerical authority. It requires authenticity and coherence. A person who has experienced change and lives it transparently has much more power to influence than any theoretical discourse. By multiplying peace with simple acts of conversation that reconciles, a gesture of forgiveness, an invitation to pray together, the mission expands and creates networks of transformation. It is a multiplier effect. What one gesture provokes in the recipient can unfold into new gestures, new decisions, and, ultimately, new community impacts. There are, of course, challenges on this journey. Commitment often clashes with established routines, with fears, with internal resistance. It's necessary to examine comfortable decisions that can impede progress. Complacency we disguise as prudence. Fear we present as zeal. interest we justify. As necessity, the mission demands honesty with oneself, clearly seeing which habits need to be reordered for service to be possible. This honesty is an act of courage because it involves renunciation, reorganization of time, and, at times, changing plans that seemed safe. Even so, the narratives accompanying the messages show that this renunciation produces growth. Those who let go of what doesn't build find space for what does. Those who decide to prioritize others rediscover meaning. Those who accept a mission experience a resilient joy. Another aspect that emerges in the stories is the blend of intimacy and public testimony. A personal mission doesn't need the spotlight. Acting discreetly and efficiently tends to yield more results. At the same time, when transformation is evident in concrete lives, it becomes a testimony that inspires. The difference between testimony and propaganda lies in the intention and the results. Testimony is a humble sharing that invites. Propaganda is a spectacle that seeks approval. The messages point to the first path, that of those who live the truth and, without fanfare, allow the impact of the transformation to speak for itself. Finally, the mission has a horizon of hope. It's not simply accepting a burden, but embracing a purposeful journey. The vigilance proposed is not anxious vigilance, but serene vigilance, a disposition that organizes life around the essential. It's a mindset that transforms decisions and, as a consequence, produces lasting impact on families and communities. By making this commitment, one inserts oneself into a larger story, a story of conversions, of small acts of service, and of revelations that, little by little, reorient destinies. What does all this mean for your practical life? Let's connect the dots. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we look at everything that's been said so far, it becomes clear that the message is not just a call to reflect, but an invitation to concrete action. The first step is to convert the heart to return to the root of what gives meaning to life, clearing away what weighs us down and making room for a new beginning. Then, you need to cultivate silence and prayer as daily tools of balance, creating a vigilant mindset that helps you make more conscious decisions. And finally, protect and prepare your home, transforming the physical and emotional space into a place of refuge, where faith can flourish and bear lasting fruit. This triad, conversion, prayer, and protection, is like a map that guides anyone who wishes to live not just by theory, but by spiritual practice that impacts their daily lives. These ideas cease to be abstract when we look at real testimonies. A young mother shared that, after years of conflict at home, she decided to start with just 3 minutes of prayer in the morning. This small gesture changed the atmosphere. She began to respond more patiently to her son's tantrums. Her husband noticed and joined in the prayer, and little by little, the home transformed from a battlefield to a meeting place. Another remarkable story is from a university student who, after adopting a digital fast 2 nights a week, discovered a mental clarity that helped him abandon addictions and reorganize his study time. He said it seemed like he had found room to breathe, something he hadn't felt before. These are simple, yet powerful stories that show that transformation is possible when one embraces the process with sincerity. This is the beauty of this calling. It doesn't demand immediate perfection. It simply requires a first step, and then another, and another. Each decision creates a chain of consequences that builds on the efforts of so many others around the world who are also responding to this same invitation. And suddenly, you realize you're not alone. There is a silent network of people who have decided to courageously guard their faith, who are multiplying peace in small gestures, who are rebuilding homes and healing wounds. This realization generates hope, because it shows that, even in the midst of chaos, there are those who choose to be light. So, I want to propose something simple and challenging at the same time. For 7 days, follow a small ritual, minutes of morning prayer and a digital fast at night. Turning off screens an hour before bed to allow for silence and reflection. Observe what changes in your inner peace, how you react to stress, and the clarity of your decisions. It may seem small, but this practice has the power to reorganize your mind and open space for the messages we've heard so far to make sense in your practical life. What all this means for your story is that the call is knocking, and the answer is in your hands. Small choices today can become big transformations tomorrow. A commitment that begins as a simple yes can become an entire journey of healing, reconciliation, and service. Comment, I'm vigilant if you accept the challenge and want to experience this mindset shift. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through this conversation. It already says a lot about your desire to seriously watch over your faith. If this content brought you clarity or touched something, leave the phrase "I'm with you" until the end in the comments. I'd like to know who else joined and read what this topic sparked in each of you. If you feel it was worthwhile, give it a like. It's a simple gesture that signals that this kind of reflection deserves to continue being produced here. If you'd like to hear more in-depth conversations like this, subscribe to the channel, not as an obligation, but as a practical way to receive future videos filled with spiritual guidance, behind the scenes, testimonies, and exercises for daily life. And there's a video right here that complements this topic. Click it and stay with me there as we delve even deeper into these practices. Thank you for your attention and for being part of this community that chooses to act with courage and love. See you in the next video.